You have to recognize that bias, and then you have to start that journey. You have to start that journey understanding that you have the bias, and that you have what I'm going to talk about are different forms of unearned privilege. We've talked about implicit bias quite a bit. We've talked about unconscious bias quite a bit. But how does that operate? It operates in the fact that we don't realize the privilege that we have and how that is personified in what we do in our day-to-day life, what we do in our workspace. For educators, how we're interacting with students and their families. It's part of the society that we live in. It's the legacy of prejudice and Jim Crow and eugenics and many other things that are part of our history. And so we're coming to grips with those things. I think for a lot of folks who don't experience that bias in the day-to-day, you saw with the George Floyd murder that folks really started to awake. And that was one of those inflection points. I think we're progressing. I think there's quite a bit of progress, and I think the United States is working towards being that those are better angels, and I think that when you see the status of African Americans and Latinos and other students and how they were situated in the 1950s and the 1960s, that we're progressing. That being said, there are some places where we aren't progressing. Our schools are more segregated now than they ever were before. I'm going to give you one example. The fact that majority white districts received $24 billion more than majority districts of color shows that sort of institutionalization of implicit bias in the way that we do education policy too. So while we've made a lot of progress, it's still very clear that there is vast inequities, and you can link those to that implicit bias and institutional racism. We're going to give you 5 ways to take action. So often we come to these conversations and we identify the problem. But in this talk, I'm going to give you 5 ways you can take action as soon as you leave the building. So we're going to ask folks to make a commitment to action.
Community Action Council is hosting a community-wide implicit bias symposium on April 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. This free and virtual event will allow us to dive deeper into the topic of implicit bias in order to better understand it and also walk away with some tools to correct for it. Our keynote speaker will be Dr. Julian Heilig from the University of Kentucky College of Education. We will also be joined by local experts from the fields of economics, education, healthcare, housing, homelessness, and law and justice. To register for this free event, head over to our website at comaction.org. Thank you to Fayette County Public Schools, LG&E and KU Foundation, and University of Kentucky College of Education for sponsoring this important conversation.